Robert, thanks so much for being here. So I've got to get, because this story, I was looking at this earlier today. This is not the most, probably the most sophisticated way to describe this, but it's the dumbest thing that I've ever seen in quite some time. And we are in a dumb era, so there's plenty. So Point Park University in Pittsburgh, they're threatening students who do not use certain pronouns or who misgender, which is apparently now a word. Campus Reform wrote about this. They have their school's Office of Equity and Inclusion, and they said that any student, any individual who's been informed of another person's gender identity, pronouns, etc., they have to respect that individual, and that misgendering, that's basically now like a punishable offense. And what gets me, Robert, about all of this is, if we're going to have a discussion about respect, then why is it's always one person whose rights and respect for that individual that's promoted at the expense of all others, including non-persons like science? I wanted to get your thoughts on those.
Yeah, I think it's because, a lot of times, because of the polarization that we see, the rights are set against each other in a way that they don't need to be. And I think we do see that in a lot of different areas. People are more interested in trying to require people to say or believe things that they're interested in rather than convince them, which is harder work. And so it's understandable that people want to take the shortcut to force other people either to believe or say what they say, or at least pretend that they're going along with it. But it doesn't accomplish the actual goal, and I think it is very divisive. It's setting people against one another in so many different ways, and I think this is another example of that. A lot of people simply, don't want to use alternative pronouns. They may have religious objections or, other ideological objections. They may make a mistake, and actually the email they sent out said that intent doesn't really matter here. It's the impact. So, even if you didn't mean to misgender somebody or made that kind of mistake, they say that doesn't necessarily get you out of it. And I think applying that standard to people is so unjust in a situation like this, where you have something that this is a pretty new phenomenon, that it really is a recipe for sort of social disaster.
You guys had this up on thefire.org. University of San Diego law school professor was investigated for, you're smiling like I know this one, investigated for a post about coronavirus, because apparently some students complained he had stated something, and this had to do with lab leak. I remember, and I graduated in 96. I graduated in high school in 96. And I remember going to college, and that's where all questions could be asked. Nothing was on the table. Everything could be discussed. Now it is the place where you can't even have a conversation about lab leak, or a professor can't even write it and post about it without a student snitching on them. And snitching, when I was in college, was bad. Now apparently it's the new thing. Now everybody's a snitch. And so he gets told on, and then they get penalized for this. I just don't think that colleges are the place. I mean, really, it's the opposite of really academic curiosity anymore. What are your thoughts on this particular story too? Because I can't believe that the university was like, well, we're going to review his post. I mean, it was something that the President of the United States has even discussed too, Robert.
Yeah, I think that actually is a great thing to highlight. This professor, Thomas Smith, who had used maybe unfortunate language in some ways to describe the fact that he thought that the Chinese government and Communist Party's story behind the coronavirus was bunk. But yeah, this was around March of this year, and if I'm sure a lot of people remember that at that time people were being deplatformed on social media. There was a lot of pushback against the idea that the coronavirus, COVID-19 virus, could have come from a lab leak. And that didn't reverse until about May, when the Wall Street Journal revealed that there was U.S. intelligence suggesting, okay, maybe that was the reason. And almost all of society now turned on a dime, and all of a sudden it was okay to talk about this kind of thing. And that was because all of a sudden they can no longer keep up this idea that the people in charge knew exactly what it was okay to say and what wasn't, and that they were always correct. That I was hoping in a lot of ways that would sort of blow up this idea of inevitability, of infallibility on both part of the people who are making those decisions and the people who listen. But unfortunately, it doesn't really seem to have abated. But it's important to remember, this person was persecuted for this in that cultural moment. And that's why free speech is important. It's to protect people when people are, people with dissenting opinions, when the pressure to do it is at its most intense. Otherwise, there's no point in having free speech protections.